Arsenal believed they had a genuine shot at signing Vinicius Jr., but reports now suggest the club has discovered its interest. May have been exactly what his camp needed to force Real Madrid back to the negotiating table. The situation has reportedly left Arsenal furious. Let me catch you up. Here's how this all kicked off. Reports dropped from The Athletic saying Arsenal were exploring a move for Vinicius Jr. Not a casual mention, a real sanctioned pursuit. The Athletic journalists David Ornstein and James McNicholas reported that Arsenal are exploring a move to sign Vinicius Jr., adding there have been no club-to-club talks yet, but the idea has approval at all levels within Arsenal. That's not nothing, that's Arteta's office, the boardroom, the sporting director, all of them nodding along to going after arguably Real Madrid's most important attacker. The interest is understood to have support throughout the North London club, from the boardroom to manager Mikel Arteta. Fans lit up instantly, and why wouldn't they? Arsenal fans were on cloud nine after being made aware of their interest in Vinicius Jr., with the Real Madrid superstar emerging as a surprise target for the Premier League champions. This wasn't some backup name floated by a random insider account. Arsenal's interest in Vinicius shocked everyone. When David Ornstein broke the news, almost everyone checked his report twice to make sure they weren't being fooled. Within a day, the story had legs of its own. Sky Sports were on it. Sky Sports' Peter Smith called it well known that Arsenal were aiming to strengthen their left-wing options, and said a deal for Vinicius Jr. would be a jaw-dropping addition. Another outlet quoted a well-followed Arsenal-focused account, claiming the club had been discussing this internally. For a while, not a sudden whim, but something that had been brewing behind the scenes. According to a reliable Arsenal-centric X account with almost 361,000 followers, Arsenal have internally discussed the signing of Vinny Jr. for some time now. But here's where it gets interesting, and where the mood at Arsenal started to sour. Because almost immediately, reporting started to suggest that Vinicius himself wasn't exactly rushing to answer the phone. One well-sourced transfer voice put it plainly: Vinicius wants to stay at Real Madrid. And that's what his camp is telling anyone who asks. Vinicius Jr. wants to stay at Real Madrid. That's what his entourage is conveying, assuring that his priority remains unchanged: the renewal. As for Arsenal specifically, the same report noted the club had confirmed their interest privately, but nobody from his side had actually been approached. The English club privately confirms its interest in the Brazilian, but sources close to the player also state that, to date, no one has gotten in touch with them. That's the crack that started spreading. Arsenal go public, or at least the story goes public, with real intent to sign one of the most electric players in world football. And the response coming back isn't excitement. It's silence followed by a clear signal. He's not interested, he wants Madrid to pay him more. Spanish football expert Terry Gibson broke down exactly why on Sky Sports News, laying out the numbers that make the standoff so combustible. Vinicius Jr. is currently on 15 million euros a year net. Real Madrid have offered him 20 million euros, and he wants 30 million euros, just over 550,000 euros a week net, with no budging on the contract from either side. That gap has been sitting there since before Arsenal ever entered the conversation. This contract situation has been ongoing for 18 months. So when Arsenal's interest became public knowledge, plenty of people inside the game started asking the same question. Is this genuinely about Vinicius wanting a fresh start in the Premier League? Or is it about giving his agents leverage to squeeze Madrid for one more concession? One report on Sports Illustrated didn't dance around it. Arsenal's transfer interest becoming public may have done Vinicius the favor of helping to push forward renewal talks, with a new contract the outcome to the saga that suits all parties. That's the version of events that's been forming since the story broke. Arsenal doing the digging, doing the due diligence, getting the green light from their own hierarchy, only to watch the story get used as a pressure point in someone else's negotiation. And once that theory started circulating, the mood inside Arsenal's corner of the transfer conversation changed fast. Because nobody at a club like Arsenal wants to be the leverage. They want to be the destination. To understand why Arsenal's move landed the way it did, you need to go back and see exactly how broken this contract situation had already become before Arsenal ever got involved. This isn't a fresh issue. It's been dragging for close to 2 years. Vinicius Jr. has been in negotiations with Real Madrid over a new deal since February. And in the early stages, Real Madrid weren't dragging their feet by choice. They had a real external threat to deal with. Mounting interest from the Saudi Pro League made Los Blancos eager to lock down the Brazil international as soon as possible. But months turned into more months and nothing got signed. Months later, there was little progress to show from the talks, with negotiations reportedly stalled over a roughly €10 million disagreement. The numbers being thrown around told the story of two sides that just weren't close. Vinicius Jr.'s representatives hope to increase his salary to €20 million per season, with an additional €10 million in possible bonuses, while Real Madrid's final offer was only a fixed €20 million salary, with no variables added on. His camp made their feelings on that offer very clear. His agents Fred Pina and Tassilo Soares reportedly believed it wouldn't make sense to accept the deal given their client already made around €17 million net per season. Including bonuses, the increase was too small to warrant an extension for a player who'd helped the team win 14 trophies, including 2 Champions League titles. Then there was a wrinkle that had nothing to do with money at all: the relationship with the man in the dugout. Xabi Alonso came in as manager, and things between him and Vinicius got tense fast. Reports pointed to deteriorating dynamic that was making the club's job of getting a deal done even harder. The deteriorating relationship between Vinicius and Alonso was more of a concern, with Vinicius issuing a public apology on social media after being substituted in the Clásico. For a while, there was actually optimism things were close. Sources described a real agreement almost being reached, and then it fell apart in a way that left both sides feeling burned. In May, the club and the players' representatives were close to an agreement, which would see Vinicius receive €20 million annually, with another $10 million in bonuses. But Vinicius' camp believed Madrid's final offer was different to what had been discussed, while club sources said a verbal agreement had been reached and then not followed through on. That left Madrid's own executives frustrated. Senior executives had not been happy with the way the players' camp had conducted negotiations. So this is the backdrop Arsenal walked into. Not a clean, straightforward pursuit of a player available on the open market, but a years-long soap opera between a superstar and the biggest club in the world, one that had already blown up once before. And Xabi Alonso's exit didn't end the saga, it just reset the clock. One report described his departure as removing a genuine obstacle that had been hanging over the talks. The sudden departure of Xabi Alonso reportedly eliminated a major obstacle, hindering Real Madrid's contract negotiations with superstar winger Vinicius Jr., prompting the club to return to the table before the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Yet even with that gone, despite opening talks to extend the Brazilian's deal, there had been little progress made between the two parties 1 year later, with Vinicius reportedly asking for a record €30 million per season, a sum the club seemed unwilling to pay. That's the number that mattered most. €30 million. It's the figure that kept coming up in report after report, the one Real Madrid kept resisting, and the one that made the entire situation ripe for a club like Arsenal to swoop in and offer him an escape route, real or theoretical. Now here's the part Arsenal fans need to sit with. This wasn't some fantasy transfer rumor cooked up by a bored account on social media. Arsenal have genuinely been in the market for attacking reinforcement, and Vinicius fits a specific hole in their squad. Their left flank has been thin. The left side of attack is arguably the weakest area in the Arsenal squad, given the sale of Leandro Trossard has left Gabriel Martinelli and newcomer Christos Tzolis as the only natural options for that flank. And Tzolis arrives having spent the last 3 seasons playing in the Eredivisie and Belgian Pro League. That's a gap a player of Vinicius's caliber closes overnight. And Arsenal weren't planning to be cautious about the money either. The Telegraph reported that Arsenal planned to make him the highest earner in the club's history, with the financial cost of a deal not said to be a problem. For context on how big a jump that would be, the Premier League champion's current top earner is Bukayo Saka on around $20 million a year. Vinicius would blow straight past that. Arteta has form here too. This isn't a manager who shies away from chasing marquee names even when the odds are long. When Kylian Mbappé was heading toward free agency a couple years back, Arteta was asked directly whether Arsenal needed to be in that conversation, and he didn't hesitate. So when the Vinicius link surfaced, it fit a pattern. Arsenal positioning themselves as a club willing to go toe-to-toe with anyone in Europe for the right player. The interest, according to multiple outlets, wasn't some half-hearted feeler. Arsenal's leadership had reportedly given internal approval to pursue the Brazilian international as he enters the final 12 months of his contract. But this is exactly why the frustration hit different once Vinicius's side started distancing themselves. Arsenal weren't floating this as some throwaway name to test the market. Multiple insiders confirmed real contact had at least been attempted. Graham Bailey reported that Arsenal have already spoken to Vinicius Jr.'s camp. And it wasn't just Arsenal circling either. The same reporting suggested serious competition. Sources said Liverpool and Manchester City, too, are interested in the Brazilian superstar. And have held talks. That's three of the biggest clubs in England reportedly sniffing around a player, whose camp was simultaneously telling everyone his priority was Madrid. If that's true, it means Vinicius's side had genuine suitors lining up, genuine leverage sitting right there, while still working every angle to squeeze more out of Florentino Perez. Real Madrid's own manager made his stance about as clear as it gets. Real Madrid manager Jose Mourinho intended to block a potential summer transfer and told the club's leadership he plans to retain all his key players, insisting Vinicius must remain with his team and wishing for his core squad to be exempt from any transfer sales. So picture the position Arsenal found themselves in. They'd done the internal work, gotten sign-off from ownership down to the manager, prepared to make one of the biggest statement signings in the club's history. And the manager on the other side of the negotiation was flatly telling his own board the player wasn't going anywhere, no matter what number got thrown around. That's not a club being coy about a transfer. That's a club being told bluntly that they're not actually part of the equation. They're a tool being used to speed up somebody else's contract renewal. And Florentino Perez himself didn't exactly leave much daylight for Arsenal either. Asked directly about the situation, he was unambiguous. Vinny is one of the best players in the world, and he is delighted to be a Madrid player, Perez said. He was decisive in winning the last 2 European Cups, and he has 1 year left on his contract. He went further, making it about as personal as a club president can. There is still time, but I tell you Vinicius wants to stay at Madrid, and I want him to stay. That's the club president publicly standing in front of Arsenal's entire pursuit and effectively waving it away. Not with hostility, with total confidence that the story would end exactly how Madrid wanted it to. This is where the story gets its sharpest edge, because once you actually line up the numbers, timeline and quotes side by side, the picture of Arsenal being used as a pressure point writes itself. Let's start with what Vinicius's camp was actually asking for, and how it compared to what was already on the table. Rock Nation, the agency representing the Brazilian star, was requesting a €15 million loyalty bonus if the winger fulfilled the entirety of his next contract, and his camp wanted his salary to approach that of Kylian Mbappé, who is reportedly earning around €30 million per season. That loyalty bonus detail matters. It's not just pay me more, it's pay me a bonus for staying, which only makes sense as a demand if staying was always the actual plan, and the leverage was just there to get that bonus approved. Real Madrid, for their part, weren't budging easily. Club president Florentino Perez was equally determined to protect the team's wage structure. And according to Sport, Real Madrid considered the current financial demands excessive, maintaining a firm position throughout the negotiations. But the same report made clear where this was always heading. If both sides failed to move closer to an agreement, the club could eventually consider listening to offers, rather than allowing the situation to become a bigger issue in future windows. Even so, the priority remained reaching an agreement. That kept the Brazilian at the Bernabeu. Now watch how fast that priority got confirmed once Arsenal's name entered the conversation. Within days of the story breaking, reporting straight from inside the process laid out Madrid's actual position toward Arsenal. The club conveyed to Vinicius's agents that while the priority was to renew him, in case he wanted to leave, they were open to reaching an agreement for his sale, given that there is an increasingly real risk of him leaving for free in 2027. Translation: Madrid weren't panicking. They were calling the bluff if there was one, by saying, fine, if you actually want to go, we'll deal with Arsenal. But if you're staying, let's stop wasting time. And a price tag appeared almost instantly, which tells you Madrid had already done their homework on what it would cost to make Arsenal go away for good. On July 26, Sport, a Barcelona-leaning Catalan publication, reported that Perez wants €160 million for Vinicius Jr. That's a fee designed to be a deterrent as much as a valuation. It's the kind of number a club sets when it wants to look open to selling on paper, while making it financially painful enough that no one actually pulls the trigger. Meanwhile, on the ground in Madrid, the renewal conversation kept grinding forward independent of anything Arsenal were doing. One outlet described a fresh round of talks getting scheduled, specifically to resolve things before the deadline got dangerous. Real Madrid and Vinicius Jr. were set to meet to negotiate a contract extension, with the meeting arriving with genuine urgency. Vinicius' current contract expires June 30, 2027, meaning he becomes eligible to negotiate with foreign clubs starting January 1, a runway both sides are keenly aware of and racing against. And the mood inside the building, according to that same reporting, wasn't panic about Arsenal. It was quiet confidence that this was always going to end in a new deal. The mood inside the club was one of cautious optimism, with leadership taking encouragement from recent communications with Vinicius' camp, and sources stressing that a sale was never under consideration. The conversation was purely about bringing the player's package in line with his status as one of the world's elite wingers. That single line, "a sale was never under consideration," is about as close as you get to a confirmation, straight from people inside Real Madrid, that Arsenal's pursuit was never going to end in a transfer. It was always going to end exactly the way Vinicius' camp wanted: a bigger contract dressed up in the noise of a Premier League bidding war. Even the most recent reporting, right up to the moment this story was breaking, kept circling back to the same number and the same standoff. Vinicius was reportedly seeking a salary close to €20 million net per season, a figure that remained a sticking point, and he had already rejected at least one offer from Real Madrid, while pushing for a significant salary increase. So every single time this saga looked like it might actually break toward Arsenal, it snapped right back to Madrid working out how to pay him more. That's the pattern that had people around the sport connecting the dots, and it's the pattern that left Arsenal, for all their genuine ambition and genuine internal excitement, looking like the audience to someone else's negotiation, rather than a real participant in it. So where does all of this actually leave Arsenal? Not empty-handed exactly, but not with what they thought they were chasing either. The clearest signal of where things stood came directly from Vinicius' own camp. In the same report that first laid out the tension, Vinicius Jr. wants to stay at Real Madrid. This is what his entourage is conveying, assuring that his priority remains unchanged: the renewal. And as for any real engagement with Arsenal, the same source was blunt. Regarding Arsenal, the English club privately confirms its interest in the Brazilian, but sources close to the player also state that, to date, no one has gotten in touch with them. That's about as direct a signal as you'll get in this business. Arsenal put in the work. They got the green light from ownership, the manager, the sporting director. They reportedly had conversations with people close to the player, and the response filtering back through Spanish and English media alike kept landing on the same conclusion. His side wanted a renewal, and Arsenal's presence in the headlines was doing exactly the job that presence tends to do in these situations. None of that means Arsenal wasted their time completely. Real interest from a club like Arsenal, backed by real money, a genuine need at left wing, and a manager willing to go after the biggest names in the game, is exactly the kind of external validation that makes an agent's job easier at the negotiating table. Whether that was the plan from day one, or simply a convenient byproduct, the effect was the same. Madrid moved, and moved quickly, once Arsenal's name was attached to the story. By the time the most recent reporting came through, the shape of the ending was already visible. Vinicius Jr. was nearing a new Real Madrid contract to 2030, with a €20 million base salary, rising to €30 million in bonuses. That's almost exactly the number his camp had been chasing the entire time. The Mbappé-adjacent figure. That had been the sticking point since before Arsenal ever entered the picture. The same report was clear about what that meant for any outside interest, Arsenal's included. The absence of a live Saudi offer removes one source of external pressure on Madrid, but also removes Vinicius' clearest negotiating card. What remains is the contract expiry, and the ability to open talks with foreign clubs from January. Structural leverage that loses potency the closer a deal gets to being signed. In other words, once the number gets close to being signed, all the outside noise, Arsenal, Liverpool, City, whoever else got mentioned, stops mattering. It served its purpose. There's a wider context to this too, one that makes it sting a bit more for Arsenal. Real Madrid have handled other renewals in this window without any of this theater. Aurelien Tchouameni recently extended his contract to 2031 in a more straightforward negotiation, and the Vinicius situation has been considerably more complicated, in part because the figures involved are of a different order, and in part because the players' representatives have been prepared to test the limits of what Madrid would offer. That's about as close as anyone close to the situation has come to spelling it out. His side tested the limits publicly loudly, with Arsenal's name doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and Madrid in the end met most of those limits. For Arsenal, that's a tough pill. They didn't just float a name for headlines. This was a club that genuinely wanted the player, genuinely believed they had a route to signing him, and genuinely put its name and its ambition on the line publicly. And what came back wasn't a negotiation. It was a wall dressed up as an open door that only ever seemed to swing one way, toward Madrid's checkbook. None of it means Vinicius or his camp did anything against the rules of the game. Every player in this business uses whatever leverage is available, and a genuine Arsenal interest is about as strong a piece of leverage as exists in modern football. but for a fanbase that spent a weekend genuinely believing they were about to land one of the best attackers on the planet. Watching that same interest get folded quietly into somebody else's pay rise is exactly the kind of ending that leaves a club feeling like it wasn't just used. It was the point of the exercise the whole time. Whether Arsenal walk away from this and pivot fully to other targets, or whether they keep the door open in case January brings fresh uncertainty around Vinicius' signature is the next thing worth watching. But for now, the winger looks headed for a new deal at the Bernabeu, and Arsenal are left holding the story that helped get him there.